In the middle of the noisy streets of Manila, where jeepneys honk every second and children laugh while playing barefoot on cracked pavements, lived a man whose voice carried a dream, Ramon Dela Cruz, a 27-year-old tricycle driver with nothing but faith and a song in his heart. Every day he would wake before sunrise, drive his old, rusted tricycle through the crowded streets, and earn just enough to feed his mother and little sister. But when the sun went down, something magical happened. Ramon became someone else entirely. He would sit outside a small cafe near Quiapo Church, where the warm smell of roasted corn and street barbecue filled the air. With his worn-out guitar and an old speaker that crackled with static, he would start singing. And when his voice rose above the chaos, the entire street seemed to pause. People said his deep tone sounded just like Elvis Presley, that rich, velvet voice that could make even the hardest heart melt. He would close his eyes and sing, "Can't Help Falling in Love," as if the words came straight from his soul. For him, it wasn't just imitation, it was connection. Ramon had grown up listening to Elvis on an old radio his father left behind before passing away. Every note carried his father's memory, every lyric reminded him of hope. Singing wasn't just a dream, it was survival. One humid night, while Ramon performed under the dim yellow glow of a streetlight, a tourist from Ireland stopped to listen. She filmed him on her phone, mesmerized by his voice. She posted the video on YouTube with the caption, "This Filipino sings Elvis better than Elvis." Overnight, the clip exploded. Within days, millions had watched. International media outlets shared it, and comments flooded in, "He deserves the world stage," and "Simon Cowell must see this guy." Then, one life-changing morning, while Ramon was polishing his tricycle, his phone buzzed. The message read, "Hello Ramon, we are from America's Got Talent. We'd love to invite you for an audition." He froze, speechless. His mother, hearing his gasp, came running. "Mama," he whispered, tears in his eyes, "they want me to sing, in America." That night, the whole neighborhood gathered, celebrating with street lights and homemade food. They collected money to buy him a plane ticket. As he boarded the plane days later, he held a small rosary and whispered, "Lord, I'm not just singing for myself, I'm singing for the Philippines." The bright lights of America's Got Talent felt almost blinding to Ramon Dela Cruz, the humble tricycle driver from Manila who had never even seen a real stage before. Standing backstage at the Pasadena Civic Auditorium, surrounded by giant cameras, glowing signs, and the buzz of thousands of spectators, his heart pounded like a drum. He had made it, all the way from the streets of Manila to one of the biggest stages in the world. Yet in that moment, he felt like a small boy again, nervous and unsure. As the crew member waved him forward, Ramon clutched the small cross around his neck, the same one his mother gave him before he left the Philippines. "Go make us proud, Anak," she had said. When the curtain rose and the crowd came into view, his knees trembled. The judges sat in front of him, Simon Cowell, Sofia Vergara, Heidi Klum, and Howie Mandel, their expressions curious but cautious. Simon leaned toward the mic, "Hello there, what's your name and where are you from?" Ramon took a deep breath and replied in his gentle accent, "My name is Ramon Dela Cruz, sir. I'm from Manila, Philippines." The audience clapped warmly. Simon smiled slightly, "And what will you be singing for us today?" With nervous eyes and a shaky smile, Ramon answered, "A song by Elvis Presley, sir, Can't Help Falling in Love." A few people in the audience sighed softly, another Elvis cover, they thought. But Simon nodded, "All right then, show us what you've got." The lights dimmed, and the familiar melody began. For a few seconds, there was silence, then Ramon sang. His voice was deep, rich, and filled with emotion. Every word carried sincerity, every note told a story. The crowd stopped breathing. By the second verse, people had started swaying, and Simon's eyebrow rose in disbelief. Heidi covered her mouth, Sophia whispered, "Oh my God," and Howie looked shocked. This wasn't just an Elvis impersonation, this was something real, something heartfelt. The soul of the Philippines poured out in his voice. When Ramon finished the final line, his voice cracked with tears. The crowd erupted, clapping and cheering so loudly that it echoed across the theater. Ramon bowed his head, overwhelmed. He whispered softly into the mic, "Thank you, this is for my country." Simon just stared at him for a moment, speechless, the kind of silence that means something magical just happened. For a few long seconds, the entire AGT studio fell into stunned silence. The echoes of Ramon Dela Cruz's final note still floated through the air like a prayer. The crowd's cheers slowly faded as everyone waited for Simon Cowell to speak. Ramon stood motionless under the golden lights, his hands trembling slightly. He had sung from the deepest corner of his heart, but he had no idea what the judges would say. Simon leaned back in his chair, eyes fixed on Ramon. Then, breaking the silence, he said softly, "Wow." The audience gasped, knowing that when Simon said that one word, it meant something powerful. He leaned forward again, resting his hands on the table. "Ramon," he said, "I've heard countless Elvis covers in my life. But what you did just now was different. You didn't imitate Elvis, you became Elvis, in spirit, not in sound." The crowd erupted in cheers again. Ramon's eyes welled with tears. Simon continued, his voice more emotional than usual. "You sang with honesty. You made us feel the song. That's what true artists do, they move people. And tonight, Ramon, you moved everyone in this room." Sofia Vergara nodded eagerly. "I totally agree, Simon. You could feel his heart in every word." Heidi Klum smiled warmly. "It was like watching a dream unfold," she said. "You have a gift, Ramon, a pure gift." Howie Mandel leaned closer to the mic and said, "Man, I've got goosebumps. You came from the other side of the world, from the streets of Manila, and you just shook this stage. You're not just a singer, you're a story of hope." The crowd stood up again, clapping, chanting his name, Ramon. 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 The camera panned across the audience, people were crying, waving small Philippine flags, holding their phones high to record this once-in-a-lifetime moment. Simon smiled softly and said, "You know, I think Elvis himself would be proud tonight." Ramon looked down, covering his face with his hands, overwhelmed. When he finally spoke, his voice cracked with emotion. "I just wanted to make my mother proud, and my country." Simon nodded respectfully and said, "You did both, my friend. You really did." As Ramon left the stage, the crowd's cheers followed him like a warm wave, a sound that would echo in his heart forever. The crowd's thunderous applause still echoed through the grand AGT theater. Ramon Dela Cruz, the humble tricycle driver from Manila, stood on stage wiping his tears. He couldn't believe what had just happened. Simon Cowell, the man feared by singers around the world, had praised him like never before. The judges were still smiling, and the audience kept chanting his name, Ramon. 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 Ramon looked around the hall in disbelief. The lights sparkled like stars, and golden reflections danced on the polished floor beneath his shoes. He placed his hand on his chest and whispered, "Thank you, Lord, thank you." For a moment, time felt still. And then it happened, the moment that would change his life forever. Heidi Klum stood up, her eyes glistening with emotion, and slammed her hand down on the golden buzzer. The sound of that buzzer roared through the theater. The audience screamed with joy as a rain of golden confetti burst from above, showering the entire stage. Ramon froze in shock. He covered his mouth, fell to his knees, and began to cry uncontrollably. The confetti stuck to his shirt, his hair, his trembling hands, but he didn't care. It felt like heaven. Simon stood up and clapped slowly, smiling proudly. "Ramon," he said over the music, "you've just earned yourself a spot in the live shows." The audience exploded again. Ramon could barely stand as Heidi walked up to him and gave him a big hug. "You made us all feel something so beautiful," she said warmly. "That's what music is all about." Sophia clapped her hands with excitement. "I have never seen a performance so pure, so emotional. You deserve this, Ramon." Howie pointed toward him and said, "This is the dream we all talk about. A man from the streets, singing from the soul, and now, standing in gold." Ramon slowly raised his head toward the ceiling as the golden flakes continued to fall. He whispered, "For my mother, for the Philippines." Simon leaned into his mic and said with a proud smile, "The Philippines must be very proud tonight, because this man just made history." The audience roared again, waving Philippine flags and cheering until the lights dimmed. Ramon walked off stage, still crying, clutching a handful of golden confetti, a small piece of the dream he had just turned into reality. Thousands of miles away from Los Angeles, in a small neighborhood in Quezon City, the glow of an old television lit up a tiny living room. On the screen, golden confetti rained down on Ramon Dela Cruz as the audience screamed his name. His mother sat in front of the TV, hands clasped tightly over her mouth, tears streaming down her wrinkled cheeks. "That's my son," she whispered softly, "that's my Ramon." Outside, neighbors gathered in the narrow alleyway, watching the performance replayed on their phones. Children danced, vendors cheered, and elderly folks clapped in joy. Someone had hung a Philippine flag on the wall, and the whole street erupted into celebration. It was as if the entire nation was watching together, united in pride. Ramon's story spread across the Philippines like wildfire. News anchors called him the Filipino Elvis and the voice that touched America. Radio stations replayed his audition clip every hour. On social media, hashtags like #ProudFilipino and #RamonOnAGT trended for days. Even schools used his story as an example of how perseverance and humility can take someone from the streets of Manila to the biggest stage in the world. Back in the U.S., Ramon's life changed overnight. Reporters wanted interviews. Fans waited outside his hotel just to shake his hand or take a photo. Yet despite all the attention, Ramon stayed humble. In every interview, he said the same thing. "I'm not a superstar. I'm just a tricycle driver who loves to sing for his people." One morning, he called his mother through a video chat. She was surrounded by neighbors, all waving and shouting, "We're proud of you, Ramon." His mother, smiling through tears, said, "You've made the whole country proud, Anak. Your father would be so happy." Ramon could barely hold his emotions. "Mama," he said, "I carried your love on that stage. Every note I sang was for home." Back in Manila, local musicians gathered to play his songs in open-air cafes. People who had once passed by his street performances now watched him on international TV, crying with pride. From the noisy streets of Manila to the glittering lights of America, Ramon had not just won hearts, he had united a nation through music. That night, under the same Manila stars he used to sing beneath, his mother whispered a prayer of thanks. "You did it, my son, she said softly, smiling at the sky. After the show, the energy backstage at America's Got Talent was electric. Crew members, contestants, and even judges were still talking about Ramon Dela Cruz, the Filipino tricycle driver who had stunned the world. Simon Cowell, usually known for his sharp critiques and tough attitude, sat quietly in his dressing room. When a reporter from a popular magazine entered to ask about Ramon, Simon smiled softly, a rare, genuine smile. He looked at the camera and said, "You know, I've seen thousands of singers walk onto that stage, but what Ramon did tonight wasn't just singing. It was storytelling. It was soul. You could feel every note, every struggle, every prayer in his voice. That's what music is truly about, connection." The reporter asked, "Were you surprised that someone from such humble beginnings could deliver such power?" Simon nodded thoughtfully. "Yes, and that's exactly why it was so special. Ramon reminded us that talent doesn't belong to fame, money, or privilege. It can come from anywhere, even from a tricycle driver in the streets of Manila. Music has no borders, no language. It's the sound of humanity." His words went viral across the internet, and Filipino fans all over the world shared the clip proudly. People said, Simon finally understood the Filipino spirit. Months later, Ramon returned home to the Philippines as a national hero. When he landed at Ninoy Aquino International Airport, hundreds of fans waited with banners and flags, chanting his name. TV reporters surrounded him, asking how he felt. Ramon, holding a small Philippine flag, smiled humbly and said, "I just wanted to make my mother and my country proud. Everything that happened, it's all because of the people who believed in me when I had nothing." Instead of chasing fame, Ramon used his prize money to open a small music school in his old neighborhood. He called it the Golden Note Academy. It was built for underprivileged children, kids who had dreams but no means. He taught them how to sing, how to believe, and how to use music to tell their stories. At the school's opening, Ramon stood on a small stage, surrounded by smiling children. He looked up at the sky and whispered, "Thank you, Lord, for using my voice to lift others." And somewhere across the world, Simon Cowell watched the news clip and smiled again, saying softly to himself, "Yes, music truly has no borders."